There was a man who never said no. His name was Michael, and if you needed him, he was there. Always. At 3 in the morning when your car broke down. On Christmas morning when you needed help moving furniture. During his daughter's recital when his boss called with one more urgent task. He wore his availability like a badge of honor, like proof that he mattered, that he was good, that he was loved. But what he didn't realize was that he was disappearing. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly, quietly, like ink fading from a page left too long in the sun. Michael worked at a small accounting firm downtown, nothing glamorous. He wasn't saving lives or changing the world, but he was reliable. When someone called in sick, Michael covered. When a deadline moved up, Michael stayed late. When the intern made a mistake, Michael fixed it without complaint. His coworkers loved him. His boss depended on him. And Michael felt needed. And feeling needed felt like love. But at home, things were different. His wife, Sarah, had stopped asking him to family dinners. Not because she didn't want him there, but because he never showed up. There was always something, someone, some emergency that wasn't really an emergency but felt like one because someone had called him, and Michael couldn't let people down. His daughter Emma had learned to expect his absence. When she blew out her birthday candles, she didn't even look for him in the crowd anymore. She knew better. One evening, Sarah sat across from him at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. Emma was asleep. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at him with eyes that had given up hoping and said something that split him open. She said, "You're available for everyone, Michael. Everyone except us. And the sad part is, I don't think you even notice." He wanted to defend himself, to explain that he was doing it for them, that being dependable meant job security, that saying yes made him valuable. But the words died in his throat because somewhere deep down, in a place he'd been avoiding for years, he knew she was right. He was there for everyone, except the people who actually needed him. He had confused being needed with being loved. He had mistaken exhaustion for purpose. He had given everyone access to his time except the people he'd promised his life to. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every missed dinner, every forgotten promise, every time he'd chosen a stranger's convenience over his family's presence. And he realized something that terrified him. He had been operating from fear. Fear that if he said no, people would stop needing him. And if they stopped needing him, maybe he'd realize he wasn't as important as he thought. Maybe he'd have to sit with himself and discover he didn't know who he was when he wasn't rushing to save someone else's day. The next morning, Michael's phone rang. It was his coworker, Lisa. Her voice was frantic. She'd forgotten to submit a report and needed Michael to cover for her. Again. In the past, he would have said yes without thinking. But this time, something inside him hesitated. He thought about Sarah's words. He thought about Emma's birthday candles. He thought about the man he was becoming versus the man he wanted to be. And for the first time in years, Michael said a word that felt like jumping off a cliff. He said, "No." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Lisa stammered. She guilt-tripped. She reminded him of all the times they'd worked together, all the favors, all the teamwork. And Michael felt it rising in his chest, that familiar panic, that need to fix it, to smooth it over, to take back the no and replace it with a yes that would make everyone comfortable again. But he didn't. He held the line. He said, "I'm sorry, Lisa. I can't this time. You'll have to handle it." And then he hung up. His hands were shaking. He felt like he'd done something wrong, something selfish, something that made him a bad person. But he also felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like he'd chosen himself. And it was terrifying and liberating all at once. Over the next few weeks, Michael started saying no more often. Not to everything, not to be cruel, but to the things that weren't his responsibility, to the things that pulled him away from the life he actually wanted to live. And something strange happened. The people who truly cared about him understood. They respected him more, not less. And the people who got angry, the ones who guilted him and called him selfish, they revealed themselves for what they were. They weren't friends. They were users. They didn't love Michael. They loved what Michael did for them. At work, his boss was surprised when Michael started leaving on time. But the company didn't collapse. Projects still got done. Other people stepped up. Michael had been carrying weight that was never his to carry, and the moment he put it down, he realized how exhausted he'd been, how close he'd come to breaking. One Saturday afternoon, Michael sat in the front row at Emma's soccer game. Sarah sat beside him, her hand in his. Emma scored a goal and looked up into the stands, and when she saw him there, her face lit up in a way that made his chest hurt. After the game, she ran to him and wrapped her arms around his waist and said, "You came." Just that. You came. As if his presence was the greatest gift he could give. And it was. That night, as he tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him and asked, "Daddy, are you going to keep coming to my games?" And Michael, with a certainty he hadn't felt in years, said, "Yes, I'm going to keep coming." And he meant it, because he'd finally learned something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. He'd learned that being available for everyone meant being present for no one. That real love isn't found in how much you can do for people who barely know your name. It's found in the quiet, steady presence you give to the people who know your heart. Michael learned that saying no wasn't selfish. It was sacred. It was the only way to protect the yes that actually mattered. The yes to his daughter's laughter. The yes to his wife's hand in his. The yes to a life that wasn't measured by how many people he could please, but by how deeply he could love the few who truly mattered. He learned that boundaries weren't walls. They were doors, and he got to decide who walked through. And in the end, Michael became someone better than the man who never said no. He became the man who said yes to the right things, to the real things, to the things that would matter when he was old and gray and looking back on a life well lived. He became a man who understood that you can't pour from an empty cup, that you can't be everywhere and expect to matter anywhere, that the people who love you don't need your availability, they need your presence. And presence requires choice. It requires the courage to disappoint strangers so you can show up for the people who would notice if you were gone. So if you find yourself running on empty, showing up for everyone except yourself, ask yourself this: who are you trying to prove yourself to? And what are you afraid will happen if you stop? Because the truth is, the people who matter will understand, and the people who don't understand don't matter. Your life isn't a resource to be distributed to whoever asks loudest. It's a gift, and you get to choose where you spend it. Choose the people who choose you back. Choose the moments that fill you up instead of draining you dry. Choose presence over popularity. Choose depth over breadth. Choose to stop being available for everyone so you can finally be present for someone. For the ones who matter. For yourself. That's not selfish. That's survival. That's love. That's life.